In generale non so, ma in WhatsApp sì, questa cosa più è vero, cioè nel senso che
So, perfect. So, welcome to everybody. This is Stefano Ambrosini from Gardone Riviera, Lake Garda. We are starting to recording this event, so thank you for your presence here. We will do 3 speeches online, then there will be like a short question and answer for every speech. If you want to make the question, you can send us in the chat, or if you are looking in Facebook Live, you can say in Facebook Live. So the plan will start with military summary that will take the word, and after him there will be the presentation of War in Ukraine channel, and finally there will be Defense Politics Asia. There will be this free speech. After every speech, I will collect one fast answer. If you, anybody from the public will want to present or any question, and we will do the debate after the first intervention. That will be for speech. The last speech will be here, like from Italy. And at the end, like a complete space for debate or whatever. I will collect all your questions. You can present all your questions writing in the chat during the presentation or at the end. Still, thank you for your time. I will give the word to military summary.
Hi everyone.
Perfect. So you can take the word and the screen control.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to say I'm very happy to see you all. I'm happy to see the Defense Politics Asia. Happy to see War in Ukraine. Thank you very much, guys, for taking your time. And I would like to start this evening with some speech. For example, I must say that each of us here has his own way in this conflict. Everyone met this war in their own way. For me, this story started 8 years ago, when the city where my wife lived was completely destroyed by Ukrainian troops, and she was forced to flee from her hometown. My wife was living in this town. This is Первомайsk. This is the Lugansk People's Republic. She was living in Первомайsk. She has a husband there. I'm her second husband, and her town where she was living, located on the east from Popasna. Popasna, the flower of Popasna, as Russian call this area. And the Ukrainian forces completely destroyed her town, her home. She hasn't been there for 8 years, and she were forced to leave the Ukraine. She were forced to leave Donetsk People Republic. But the most interesting thing is that she remained devoted to Ukraine, to the Ukrainian people. She didn't change her passport. She is still Ukrainian. She voted for Zelensky, and she loved Ukraine no matter that Ukrainian forces destroyed her home, her town, because she doesn't think that was their mistake, or it's they who did this. She has another opinion about that. But the thing is that she promised herself that she would never return again to Ukraine. And one of the reasons why she is not going to return to Ukraine ever is that there are a lot of mess there, a lot of balagan in Ukraine. It was 8 years ago, but this conflict, this special military operation, and if you don't mind, I would like to call this operation like special military operation, not a conflict, not a war. I would start calling this operation as a war as soon as anybody would declare the war. But from now on, nobody declared the war. And the thing is that Ukraine didn't declare the war. And it's the biggest question. This special military operation started on the 24th of February. For me, it started with the call of my friend. He was living in Kiev. He called me at 7 a.m. and he told me, Dima, the war started. What should I do? What should I tell him? Of course, I tell him, take your wife, take your kid, and come to me, to Belarus. I'm living in Belarus. This is Ukraine, this is the Russian Federation, and this is the Belarus. I'm from this country, from this small country. And you know that at the beginning of this special operation, the Belarus was considered as the ally of the Russian Federation. Maybe these days somebody thinks the same. It's like your opinion, it's up to you. And he called me and asked me if I can take him. And of course I told him, take your bag, take your wife, children, come to me. He was living in Kiev, in Troyeshchina area, in this block. So you can see it's not very far, this Troyeshchina, and this is the road that leads to Belarus. It's around 150 kilometers. You can say that it might take 2 hours to reach the border. But it was 7 a.m. and it was a little bit late because you remember that the first bombing started like at 4 a.m. So when they took all their bags and started this trip, there was a big traffic from Kiev to Chernigov. It's around 100 kilometers line of cars. It was, if you took a Google Maps, you would see the red line, like the big traffic here. Big traffic. Well, I'm trying to say that somewhere around 11 a.m. or 10 a.m., he called me and told me that the Ukrainian authorities told them using the radio that they closed the border. He told me what to do, what should I do? Our authorities closed the border. They told that there is no way to cross the border and to get anywhere in this direction, in direction of Belarus or the Russian Federation. What should I do? He asked me. I told him, you should continue. There is what can you do? You want to turn back? You won't be able to use the same road to get the Kiev because you will stand there for other 10 hours. And we know that. Meanwhile, the Russians were starting their movements from Gomel, from Mozyr towards Chernigov, towards Kiev, towards Chernobyl. The tanks were going right in front of them. And I told him, you should continue. There is no other way. You can't return. You can't turn back. And he moved further. He told me that everybody who was in this traffic on this road, they turned back and start movement towards Kiev. And then there was another traffic, but another direction towards Kiev from Chernigov. But he continued. And he told me that only 5 cars reached Chernigov. So there was like big traffic. And after the Ukrainian authorities announced that the border was closed, only 5 cars from Kiev reached Chernigov. I'm not talking about like, maybe there was much more cars, but he told me the cars that he could see in this moment. So he got Chernigov, and then he got the bridge that was located above on the top of Chernigov, between Chernigov and the border with Belarus. There is a bridge here in this area. And he reached the bridge. He told me that he saw the tanks that were heading in front of him. And these tanks, he saw tanks like you can see right now at me, like in front of your face. And he told me, asked me what to do. The bridge was destroyed. There was no bridge because the Ukrainians, when they were retreating, they destroyed everything on their way just to slow down the Russian attack in this area. And I told him that you should continue. You can't turn back because it was already 12 or maybe 1 p.m. And on these lines, there was already casualties. People were dying on these lines. When he was on the road, he saw like how one of the military warehouse or military base was destroyed by the missile. He saw it by his own eyes. And I told him, you can't return back because you don't know what's going on to the next. So he continued. And he reached the border. He reached the border with Belarus from the Ukrainian side. And he called me one more time and told me, I reached the border and I expected to see the Ukrainians, the real border, What does it mean the border was closed? The Ukrainian authority announced that the border was closed. And he reached the border. And you know what he saw? He saw nothing. He saw empty buildings, empty Ukrainian buildings. The border with Belarus. Nobody was there. And I understand, together we understood that nobody closed the border. They just announced that the border was closed. They just told people that the border was closed to avoid, not to give them possibility from Kiev to reach the Belarus, to reach the Russian Federation, and to leave this conflict from this area. And they were told that the border was closed, and a lot of people returned to Kiev under heavy fire and the heavy, maybe some of them returned to Bucha, who knows? Maybe some of them returned to Chernihiv, who knows? Only 5 people reached the border, because he told me that when we got there, some more cars came to the border. We get to this border, we opened everything we need, nobody was there. He called me one more time and asked, what should I do? I told him, if you reach the border, then go to Belarus. The people, the border from Belarus, they will meet you. And he did that. He came to the border, to the Belarus authorities. Of course, they asked him question, how did you do this? Because how did you do this? Then they asked him, we were expecting more refugees. Where is everybody? And he told that according to the Ukrainian authorities, they announced that the border is closed, so people were forced to turn from this border, from this side of evacuation. He crossed the border, he entered the Belarus, he came to me, and he lived in my house for 10 days. It was very interesting time. It was very interesting time because he was in Belarus, and on the second day he understood who is Belarus in this special operation, whose territory is using for some missile attacks in Ukraine, on Kiev, on the streets where he was living. He called every day, he called to his friends, his mothers, to friends, sorry. And every time his friends asked him a question, where are you? And he told me that he's in Belarus, he was in Belarus. They were very surprised. But the thing that he understood from their words, that they was not just even surprised, they were angry, they hate him. And on the 10th day, he told me in the morning, it was the breakfast time, he told me that he was planning to leave, to return to Ukraine. I told him, why are you planning to do this? You can stay here, you have very good work, you can do everything with you. He was engineer, he was working with cars, fix the cars, engines. You will be able to find a job everywhere, in Belarus as well. But he told me, no, I'll return. I would return to Ukraine. I asked him why. He told me that I can't stay here while my friends are dying there on these lands. And he returned. First, he returned to Lvov through Poland because there was no way to cross the border between Belarus and Ukraine. He crossed the Poland border, and then he entered the Ukraine from Lvov. Now he's in Kiev. Everything is okay with him. He's not in the war, in the conflict. He's not in the military. He's a regular civilian. I don't know if he is happy right now. I don't know what he's planning to do. And I won't know this ever because he will never tell me about his real feelings. So this is the story how this war started for me. And today is the 23rd of May. And I must say that I see, it's my opinion, of course, there are another 3 speakers here, 2 speakers at least. Maybe they have a different opinion. But my opinion that Ukrainians have a lot of problems in this war. In my opinion, if nothing changes, the Russians are going to win this war, this special operation. They will complete everything they wanted. maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. If you ask me if there any flag to understand when the war is going to end, yes, there is a flag. There is a flag, and this is Odessa. I can say that as soon as operation in Odessa and Nikolaev starts, we can start speaking about the ending of this special operation, at least from the Russian side. I'm not sure that Ukrainians are going to finish this operation ever until they return every single square meter of their land. I'm not sure about that. No, I'm sure that they won't stop. They will fight till the last Ukrainian. It's not the US decision, you know, that the West countries, like there is a war, people said that the US are planning to fight till the last Ukrainians. No, you don't know Ukrainians if you think like this. The Ukrainians themselves are going to fight for their land till the last Ukrainian. I know what I'm saying, and I know my wife, and I spoke with my friend, he returned. I know Ukrainians, they will fight till they love their country, they love Ukraine. So I repeat myself, as soon as we see the situation in Odessa and Nikolaev, we can start speaking about the end of this conflict, at least from the Russian side. If we're talking about the current situation, I repeat myself that situation on the front lines are very bad for the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians, they had 3 bad days in this special operation. The 24th of February, when this operation started, the day when the Russians managed to cross the Seversky Donetsk River and establish control over the Izum. They crossed the river in this area. They built, it was like, we can say that it was the first pontoon operation. It was a very successful operation. They couldn't take this town for a very long time because there is a small hill, a rock in this area. And the Ukrainians from this rock, they had possibility to control area around 10 till 50 kilometers around Izum. So the Russians, they used this forest to cross silently in this area, to cross the bridge and to cut the Izum from the big land. And as soon as they established control over Izum, it was the second bad day for the Ukrainians. The third bad day for the Ukrainians was when the Popasna flower has bloomed. Popasna flower is the area, is the bridgehead around the town by the name of Popasna. And the flower, because the Russians are calling this area, this bridgehead, as the flower of Popasna. They took this town and they said that later this town bloomed. What does it mean bloom? They start their offensive operations towards any direction, towards Kamyshovacha, towards Bilogorovka in this area, towards Solidar, towards Svetlodarsk, and many, many other directions. And the fourth bad day for the Ukrainian is the 23rd of May today. Today, I can say that it was a very bad situation for the Ukrainians. They lost almost everything they could during the day. The Russians, they have almost established control over the town by the name Liman. They bombed this town heavily. First, they established control over the northwest part of the town. They were attacking from they were starting offensive operation from Drobyshevo towards the Liman. Then the Russians established control over the town Toshkovka, and by the taking of the town by the name Toshkovka, they create at least operational tactical encirclement over this Gorsk-Zolotoy cauldron. And the Russians, of course, they established control over the Svetlodarsk fortified area. But the thing is that Ukrainians wasn't defeated. At least they were trying not to be defeated in every front line. For example, in Svetlodarsk, they took a decision to retreat, and it's a very smart decision. I'm telling you that I think that it may be the first time the Ukrainians decided to retreat, not to be encircled, not to die, not to waste their manpower, but to retreat. It's very nice. It's very good for them that they understand that there is nothing bad in retreating, much more worse when you're dying for nothing. For example, in Liman, they also tried to retreat, but around 500 soldiers were surrendered in this area. In Toshkovka, they lost the battle. They couldn't retreat from this area. And if you ask me if there is an end in this war, I must say that there is no end in this war. Not because of that fact that the Russians, if they are able to establish control over the Ukrainian, they will continue their movement towards Poland or Lithuania or something like this, or Ukrainians are planning to fight with the Russians until they turn every single square meter. Not about that. This war, sooner or later, we see the hot part of this war, in my opinion, that as soon as our leaders will understand that there is no way from this war, there can't be no winners. For example, the West world, they can't allow Putin win. Putin can't allow the West win. It's obviously, there would be no winners in this war. So that's why I think that they will try to transfer this war. And in a year, maybe by the end of this year, we're going to see the second Cold War. And to tell the truth, it's much more better than the hot part of this war, because Cold War is Cold War. We won't see these casualties. We won't see these terrible things. But the Cold War, the Cold War, I don't think that Cold War is a bad thing. I think that the Cold War, that previous Cold War that was in the 20th century, I think that it's miracle. You know that there are 7 miracles in the world. I think that the Cold War is the next miracle, because during the Cold War, we reached the moon. During the Cold War, we created computers. We created everything we have right now. So this part of war, when we are competing with each other, but not just fighting and killing each other, gives us a lot of benefits. And I think that the next Cold War that is going to be, obviously, I think that this Cold War can help us, can solve a lot of our problems, not just Ukrainians, Russians, and the European problems. I hope that the next phase, this Cold War, will help us to solve the problems with the cancer, with the food, with the AIDS, with the lot of problems. But for now, we have what we have. And I hope that by the end of this video, we will finish everything and we will hear that the war has ended. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you so much for the first speech. So there was some technical problem at the beginning about Facebook stream, but I solved. So everybody is available to see it, because there was some privacy technical problem. So there is at least full stream in Zoom. There is about 70 people inside. So let's see if there is like one fast question for military summary. Okay, perfect. So I will read this for you. So this is a Cold War. Cold War are between superpowers, not smaller nation, and uses smaller nation as proxies to fight wars with another superpower. It's only hot in this opinion because Ukraine, it's the proxy being used. This is like the question for you. You have a mic off. Another question that it's on the chat, it's about what are the chances of Poland sending in troops, and it's the same question. Do you think that NATO can be dragged into war? And the rest we will take for the end.
Thank you for a very nice question. And there was problems with the microphone, sorry. You know that yesterday the Ukraine and Poland then signed a lot of documents, very interesting documents. And just want to say something about these documents about the rights that Polish citizens achieved in Ukraine. Under the new law, Polish citizens in Ukraine will be able to hold elected positions, so governors, mayors, to be applied to the state authorities, to the management of defense enterprises, to get access to the secret data, to be judges. Imagine yourself, the Polish citizens will be able to be judges and will be able to judge Ukrainians on their territory. And one of the most important, the Polish police will have the right to monitor law and order. I know that maybe you saw that today there was a meeting between the president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, and the president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko. The meeting was held after the meeting between Zelensky and Andrzej Duda, right? And I think that there were a lot of questions they discussed, but mainly I think that they discussed the question of this confederation, because I think that this document that was signed between Poland and Ukraine is the first step of creation. I think that the first confederation in the Central Europe. We saw such confederation in the past. If you remember, in the in the 18th, 17th century, there was a Poland kingdom. In Russian it calls Rzecz Pospolita. It was almost the same confederation, and that confederation did almost the same job that Ukrainians and the Polish want to make this confederation do. For example, in the 17th and 18th century, the main job of that Polish confederation was to stop the Russians on the border. So the same thing we can see right now. And this is a very powerful union, very powerful union. If you take a look at the map, you're going to see that this is the Poland, this is the Ukraine, and as you can see, there is a border from one sea to another sea. So that's why this union can control the traffic, every traffic. And we know that according to those signed documents, they have no border anymore. There is no border between Poland and Ukraine. And we can say that the east border in Ukraine is the east border of Poland. And we know that at least when I was at school, we had history lessons, of course, and everybody at least in Belarus knows the ambitions of Polish to restore their Poland kingdom. Because if you remember, if you know, the Poland kingdom was included Poland, Belarus, Ukraine, and the Baltic states. It was a very powerful kingdom, and they want to do. I can't say that they want to do this right now, but I'm sure that everybody wants to do the best for their country, for their homeland, right? So that's why, of course, it's very good for the Poland to have such a union with Ukraine, to have such power in Ukraine, of course. And it's the first step of creating of this confederation. And the main idea of this confederation is to stop the Russians, not just in a military way, but also in traffic, cargo, oil, everything. Everything that goes from the Russia towards Europe should pass this confederation with its prices, with its taxes, with its regulation, of course. But the Poland should pay for this. So why is there so many benefits for the Poland? For what purposes? For what reason? And of course, the Ukrainians, they want somebody to fight with them, with the Russians. And we know that there are around 30,000 of Ukrainian soldiers on the border between Belarus and the north of Ukraine. And these border around 30,000. And the Ukrainians, of course, they want to use these forces in Donbass, where they have a lot of problems. We know that the Ukrainians have around 700,000 soldiers. It was announced by Zelensky, but most of these forces located in towns, on the border, and so on. So of course, Zelensky wants more forces, but for these purposes, he needs somebody to control the border with Belarus and to control the order in these towns. So that's why he needs something like military police. And of course, Poland is the best country who can do this job for the Ukrainians. And meanwhile, we know that by the end of July, by maybe beginning of July, we're expecting the military help from the West countries. And by that time, the Ukrainians, they have already 700,000 of soldiers. And by that time the help arrives, they will be able to push a lot of forces toward the Russians. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So I received a lot of questions, but we will do at the end. So now it's the turn of war in Ukraine. So if you can take the mic, okay, perfect. Try to take the screen.
Yep.
For the question, for the other people, you can put the question, we will answer at the end. But we will put only one question after any speech because it will be too long. So the question and answer will be at the end, but I will collect all your questions. So war in Ukraine, the stage is yours.
Okay, well, thank you for everyone. Thanks for joining. Thanks for inviting. It's an honor speaking here. First of all, I intend to do very short sort of introduction and leave most of the time for Q&A. So let's first define our position. So we fully support Ukraine in its defensive war for self-determination. So that's how we see that position. So we want to make it clear what is our position so everybody understands that. What another key cornerstone on our position is that we totally don't accept propaganda, right? There is a lot of propaganda from Russian and from Ukrainian side. In our opinion, propaganda equals death, right? It's lie, and lies always lead to death. So that's one important point, distinguishment of our position relative to many other channels. And the second, the sort of related to this is what we try to achieve is to provide as objective, as truthful information as we have, regardless of how ugly it is, how bad it is, doesn't matter, or how good it is, right? So that's our general philosophical approach when we make our videos, right? So this is about us a little bit, so most viewers understand our position. Then let's actually talk about this war, and let's discuss what this war is, what it is not, the progression of the war, and maybe we can speculate about the future of this war, because that will be totally speculative and we're not sure if there's a lot of value in that. So let's define first what this war is. So this war is actually war between Russia and China to basically to change the world order. So the world order was sort of set in stone after World War II, right? And so now there are, Russian old dying kind of power, and then young Chinese, they want to revisit that. They want to rewrite how the world works right now. And so this is one side of the war. And having said that, probably Russia and China don't even know that they are in the same boat. So you can make analogies with similar to how Germany was and Japan in World War II. They were not friends, but they were sort of situational alliance between the two. So this is one thing. So on the other side, there is West. And by West, what we mean is the cultural approach. It's not geographical, it's about culture. And there, there is Europe, and Europe is actually not united. There is a clear splinter in Europe. And then there is, US, Canada, and then there is Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and to extend South Korea and Taiwan. So that's kind of like another group, large group on the other side. Yeah, and Ukraine is obviously in that basket as well. And then there is everybody else is undecided, right? And the reason what the sort of so-called West wants is they want to preserve the status quo, the way the world existed since 1945. And for them, there is a lot of vested interest in that, right? Economically and otherwise. And there is a lot of countries that kind of like not join either side. It's more developing world because there is not much, in not much in sort of maintaining the status quo for them. There's not much interest. And at the same time, there's not much interest in supporting, let's say, Russia or China. There's nothing in them in this war, basically, right? So they kind of like standing by and seeing which side kind of wins. So this is kind of like a big picture. Now let's a little bit zoom into Ukraine and what's, what the role of Ukraine in this. And the role of Ukraine is very simple. Many people say it's a proxy, whatever. From Ukrainian perspective, it's a fight for self-determination. And Ukrainian people, the war is being waged by Ukrainian people, Ukrainian citizens, not even Ukrainian government. So when we see these pictures of Zelensky as like a leader or whatever, it's not. It's really Ukrainian people who make this happen. Because if it were just about Ukrainian government, the country would fall apart probably in 3 days, as was planned by Russia. Because the Russian intelligence was absolutely correct that Ukrainian government is extremely weak, incompetent, and largely corrupt. And so that's perfect prey for predator, right? Where there was miscalculation is that it's about Ukrainian people. That Ukrainian people want to live in different countries. They don't want to be part of the Russia, and not like Russia, they don't want to be part of the Russian culture. Let's put this way. So this is, in a way, it's a war of clash of cultures, different perceptions of how people want to live their lives. And so this war is being waged by Ukrainian people. And in this way, Ukraine is not a proxy for the West or anything. It's a sovereign in that way, Ukrainian people. They fight for their own interest, right? And it happens that it aligned with the interest of larger West, right? So that's alliance. That's what's really happening here. So this is about their sort of general big picture of the war. Now let's actually look at the progression of the war and what was happening. There are actually a couple distinct stages. So the initial stage from obviously February 24 to about end of March, let's say March 30th, maybe March 31st, 29, somewhere in that ballpark. And that phase of the war was partially kind of won by Ukraine. You cannot say it's won, but where Ukraine managed to dwarf Russian plans, thwart them, right? So like they managed to stay alive, right? And in this way, they made everything so much more messier for Russia, right? And then specifically, we're talking about this attack on Kyiv from south and west, which failed. And the Russian side was forced to withdraw back north and northeast. And that happened not because Russian side wanted it or they were forced to, because there was significant losses of troops there and equipment, and they could not achieve what they wanted. They couldn't capture Kyiv, right? And basically remove Ukrainian government. So they realized there was a right decision for them, maybe like 2 weeks too late, but in the end they withdrew. So that was the end of the first phase, right? In this way, that's why we say it was kind of won by Ukraine, because Ukraine managed to stay alive as a state. Then there is now from about like mid, early April, right? And technically we can say that there was a start of the second phase of the war, where the focus is now solely on this Donbass salient that we always discuss in our videos, right? So this is where the focus, and then this is what we always kind of try to explain, that Russian side does not have enough troops right now to continue attacking everywhere, and they didn't have those troops in the first place. That's actually was the reason of the failure in the first phase. So they learned the lessons. They decided to focus on this Donbass salient, and they tried to build the sort of pincers to encircle Ukrainian troops in Donbass salient. That failed, right? Now they focused on the smaller portion of Donbass salient. We call it Severodonetsk salient, and Right now, they making progress. It's very extremely painful for Ukrainian army. There are very heavy losses.
I'm sorry. Do
yeah.
you need also screen or no? Because it's not shared.
It's not, you're not seeing? Okay, that's
No.
strange.
You need to share. You need to.
Okay, I thought you sharing my screen. Okay, because I don't see.
No, you need to push the.
For some reason, I lost all of my control, so it looks like you're totally controlling the.
No. You put on the green button, screen share, and you can try.
I still don't really have any controls on my side in terms of Zoom.
Okay,
let me kind of release me so I can gain controls on my side, and then
you can do whatever you want inside. It's everything. It's open.
So you're not seeing anything. That's what you're saying.
No, we see only like all the gallery and the speaker without the screen.
Got it. So share screen.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Now we can see.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So sorry for this little bit of a technical mess up, but going back to this. So now there is an attempt to destroy Ukrainian army here in Donbas salient, right? This is where it's all going. Ukraine is very strained in terms of losing a lot of manpower, resources, and everything. So there is a problem in Ukraine. Where it's going to go, we don't want to speculate, because it can go either way. It's possible that Ukraine will manage to keep this Donbas salient and nothing is going to, meaning Severodonetsk salient, and it's possible that it will lose it. So this is even totally irrelevant in the big picture. The big picture is the following: the dynamic is the following. Right now, Ukraine has a lot of manpower, right, to refill the troops and all that stuff. It lacks weapons and ammunition. That's like severe big problem. And there's also fuel shortages problem. So this is the Ukrainian side. Now let's look at the Russian side. Russia has tons of equipment, tons of ammunition, has lack of manpower. And not because Russia as a country has a lack of manpower. Russia as a country is 3.5 times larger than Ukraine. It's because in Russia, it's not a war, and the same as mentioned was in Ukraine, it's not a war, but there is mobilization in Ukraine going on. And so Russia can still trying to play this war with the regional amount of troops, probably like 200,000, plus they had some new contractors, but we estimate that they got like probably 25 to replenish the losses. So they are smaller right now. So we mentioned this like slowly melting ice cube, right? We estimate that there's about 160 size-wise of the Russian troops right now fighting here in Ukraine. And so this is we're getting to somewhere to this kind of like a point where the Russian troops may gain even this Severodonetsk salient, but then they will be totally exhausted in terms of manpower. And the Russian top will need to decide whether they want to double down on this war and, you know, call mobilization or partial mobilization or stealth mobilization, whatever but some way, shape, or form, they need more people. So, and we do our best case scenarios that they will go that route. Probably in a month, maybe in July, but sometime, or maybe even August, we don't know. But they probably will go that route. So that's a sort of situation on the Russian side. Plus, Russia is being severely crippled by the sanctions, and specifically not so much by the, like natural resources. They sell natural resources, no problem, and they will be able to sell them going forward. Where the problem is that they now cannot get basically technology from the West. That's the biggest, that's what is sort of underpinning Russian army to large extent, and Russian society as a whole. So like the things getting to that sort of difficult situation is getting enough servers, right, for your data centers. So this is difficult situation, and it's going to get worse, right? So so that's like a sort of situation on the Russian side. On Ukrainian side is also very difficult situation. So economy is pretty much dead, right? So Ukraine lives off the support, financial aid from the West, and especially it's going to be true sometime in June and for sure July, right? As there is no essential economy left in Ukraine. Ukrainian army is really like also will need to be supported by the supply of weapons and ammunition to continue fighting, because all of the major production facilities either destroyed or severely damaged to the point that output is not totally not sufficient, let's put this way, right? So Ukraine faces this very difficult situation in terms of weapons and armor and just economy, right, to survive. And so where this all gonna end up, and then there is also huge expectation that Ukraine is gonna receive a lot of weapons from the West, which in our opinion sounds to be not realistic from what we're seeing. Especially we mentioned that the Germany is clearly not willing to provide support, but they're just kind of playing the game. And the same goes true for France, and we wouldn't call Italy for sure, but yeah, more or less the same kind of story. So we can see even internal split within Europe, where the like old European core, the three countries are totally not, trying to sort of distance away from this war and kind of maintain the relationship with Russia, or ability to renew those relationships later. So this is kind of like a dynamic here, where on the other side there we see UK, US, even Australia, who are full in supporting Ukraine. So the good part for Ukraine is that US industrial complex and plus UK is much stronger than Russian, and even if the rest of the Europe is not supporting, that's fine. It's not a big deal. So this is where it's all end up, is really, in our opinion, is the fight of the will. Is will of Ukrainian people, Ukrainian population is stronger than the will of the Russian counterparty to destroy Ukraine. And as we said, this is not a war about just Ukraine. This is the war about rewriting the world order. And Ukraine is just a stone in that from the Russian perspective, where they need to reassemble Soviet Union to gain the weight, right? So Ukraine was an integral part of the Soviet Union, and without Ukraine, Soviet Union never happens. So for that reason, Russia wants to have the all of Ukraine. And then a little bit responding to that question about the Poland and Ukraine and all that stuff, what Russia hopes is that Poland will make a mistake by actually like bringing troops to Ukraine and into Western Ukraine, specifically this region, Lviv, Ivano-Frankivsk, Ternopil, Volyn region. Well, it's split into two, but Volyn and Rivne, but this whole area. And that will eventually allow Russia casus belli against Poland. So they hope to receive, so that will be sort of like honorable war to liberate Ukraine for Russia from the Polish oppressors. So that's the hope for the Russian side in all of this, and we'll see in this case what's transpired. What is very clear is that Poland was providing huge support, big support for Ukraine in this war, because they, it's all based on the history, and I don't want to go into history, but the Poland learned its lesson from the past, and it's realizing that after Ukraine, Poland is next on the list. So the interests are aligned in this way, even at this kind of like low level situation. And in general, you can say that the whole Eastern Europe is more or less aligned with Ukraine versus, as I said, the totally different situation with the core of Europe, which is totally not aligned, basically. Where it's all gonna go, we don't know. And for how long, we don't know. We clearly, what is clear is that Ukrainian society internally is still determined to fight, right? Because it's in a way, it's an existential fight, right? So for that reason, there is huge motivation. And on Russian side, in our opinion, is not that high motivation. There is a certain percentage of society that really wants that war, and they really drive this right now. But that's, let's say 10%, whatever, 15% of Russian population, right? Who really like not just supporting it, but actually willing to, you know, put their own like life on the line in this war. And so for that perspective, we don't know how much sort of drive will Russia have eventually, because effectively it's fighting war against 40 countries, right? It's not just Ukraine. So with that, I would like to stop and let you know, open it for Q&A.
Perfect. So thanks, War in Ukraine, for the presentation. I will put only one question. The only thing that I asked to the viewers, it's if I already posted in the chat. If you want to make any question to the speaker, you need to use the chat. Don't use the chat as a chat, but only for the questions. So if you want to make a question, please say in advance the speaker who you want to ask to, because we don't understand, however. So two fast question that I will put. Okay, so one was about, from Radar, what kind of final peace treaty you see happening between Russia and Ukraine? And another one faster, it's like why are statement like Russian side is exhausted, on which information and authority? Such statements were made on your channel yesterday about forces near Liman and Popasna, yet today we see massive offensive action there and territory gained by Russian forces. So only these two questions about peace treaty and about like Popasna and Liman, and then we will move to the Defense Asia presentation, and we will put a long question and answer at the end. Thank you in advance.
So most likely we, you know, it's all speculative, first of all, in terms of a peace treaty, right? So our opinion, there are two basic options for the peace treaty. One option is Ukraine doesn't exist and Russia signs a peace treaty with let's say NATO, US, or, you know, West, sort of to say. That's one thing, and basically captures Ukraine. So that's one option for the peace treaty. The other option is Ukraine regains its territory back, stays neutral, NATO-wise and EU-wise, and that's another option that we see where this conflict. So basically, they're very far away from each other. Right. So one is if Ukraine is totally defeated, then obviously Ukraine kind of ceases to exist, at least for now. And then second sort of polar opposite of it is if Ukraine manages to successfully fight, then you know, then it's able to gain back its territories. So that's that question. And when the second question was about when we say that Russian troops are exhausted, this refers, first of all, to general overall situation of the Russian army, right, in Ukraine. And when we said that there are 200,000 troops initially, to our estimate, 160,000, that's what we mean by that, right, in Ukraine right now. So you see there is a smaller amount of troops, right, because of the losses. So that's what is in like general sort of understanding of that. In terms of whether the Russian side is able to create very local, very focused advantage, it's totally possible. You just scramble, you take troops from other section of the front and you create advantage. And not to mention that we mentioned that there was some relatively large unit that was floating around, and we spotted it in the area opposite to Avdiivka, around like south of Horlovka. So, so that there could be that unit has been thrown in the battle, let's say, in Liman or near Svitlodarsk salient. By the way, in terms of Svitlodarsk salient, that attack was not result of superiority of Russian troops in terms of numbers. That was a result of the skill. So that was actually what we mentioned before several times, that we seeing different sort of handwriting near Popasna relative to typical handwriting of the Russian command. And that handwriting is much, much better. And so that, and we will show it in our video later tonight, what happened there. It was sort of wins through actually intelligence, as opposed to just superior, like just more Russian troops or anything like that. So that's the first one. In terms of Liman, it's a small section of the front. You can create numerical superiority there by just pulling reserves from nearby, right? So there might be like, whatever, 1,000, 1,500 Ukrainian defenders in Liman itself, like on that smaller bridgehead. If you bring another 1,000 or scramble 2,000 or 3,000 from elsewhere, you can clearly create advantage, right? Plus, there is also advantage in terms of air support and so on. So, so that's what we mean, that this, you really need to understand and follow our videos to understand the logic of what we're saying, and not take it in a kind of like a primitive way, I would say this. That's all.
Okay, perfect. Thanks to your War in Ukraine for the speech. Then we are collecting all the questions for the ending debate. Now the stand is for Defense Politics Asia. So I will give you the audio. Okay, let's reactivate because it's deactivated. So perfect. And you can take the screen. Try to take it.
Okay. What happening? Wait.
Okay, you have already your fans in the chat that are calling.
Okay, give me a okay. Hello everyone, this is Defense Politics Asia, and I'm Wyatt Mingji Lim. You can just call me Wyatt. Give me a few seconds. My presentation just ran out of RAM. Wait a bit. Okay. Okay, I can now show you where am I? Okay. Share screen on screen, this one.
Perfect.
Okay.
It's yours.
Hi. So hello everyone, this is Defense Politics Asia, and okay, so I'm Wyatt. In case you don't know, I think the people who follow me tends to know. I'm around on Facebook, Twitter, Quora, Patreon, YouTube, Telegram, Instagram, and Reddit. If you do not know, you didn't read the description in my videos. So I'm going to talk quite differently from the rest. Let me add some lighting. Okay, from the previous two speakers, I'll be touching more on the geopolitics. Because I think that's very important to understand how this how do this war come about, and how would this war go and end. So we'll go with all these things. Let's not waste time reading this. Understanding the balance of power. So there is nothing more important than the balance of power in geopolitics. So it doesn't mean that when you're a smaller power means you're weaker. You can always balance the power between you and your potential adversary by being in an alliance like NATO. So, and this balance of power thing goes across the board to everything, including politics, and including even office politics. And that's why in EU or in the United Nations Security Council, you have veto powers, because the veto powers immediately give you a balance of power. No one can override anyone. One person say no, everybody don't get anything. And as such, because the balance of power is so powerful, that's why the Cold War, right, between NATO and USSR is among the most peaceful period in the history of Europe. The moment USSR collapsed, that's when you saw Yugoslavia collapse as well. And because the balance of power has been broken. So you can see this balance of power like a kind of God, the God of balance of power. So if you break this law of the balance of power, and then greed will start to take over, and then the more powerful power will start to take advantage of any opportunity that arises from weakness or uncertainty, and the only thing that stops them is because when there's a balance of power, the cost of trying something becomes very, very high. So, for example, between NATO and the Warsaw Pact, it is not possible to go to war without ending in a mutually assured destruction. And this is also how Crimea is lost to Russia, because Ukraine was in a weak and uncertain state, and the Russian Federation cannot take a chance, and they decided to annex Crimea to protect their Black Sea Fleet port at Sevastopol. So if you don't respect this God of balance of power, and then you will start to bring disaster and calamity to your country. If you're lucky, you just get instability, like in Sri Lanka. But if you're unlucky, then what you get, it will be war. And that's what happened in Ukraine. So pick your fight carefully. If you are this car, don't try to smash the train. That's not very wise. So an easy example of how things can go out of hand. So between neighbors, so it can be any country. So since this event is hosted in Italy, so we have the Italy ball here, and then we have a happy friend, happy face here. So no, it's peaceful. Everything is peaceful. So one fine day, the smiley face bought a gun, and he said, "Oh, this pistol is totally not aiming at you. Don't worry at all. But if you are Italy ball, are you going to be okay with that? The balance of power is now tipped, is now unbalanced. Even if you are the best of friends, best of neighbors, that you all have been knowing each other for the past 2,000 years, you're still going to feel very uneasy, right? With this neighbor have a gun and you have nothing. So of course, what every sane country will do, they take a machine gun. So and this is not very sane, actually. It's actually very insane, because now you continue to unbalance the power, but now only on the other side. So no son problema. I think I probably pronounced it wrongly. We are best friends, right? Then the smiley face is like stress, right? This is what arm race is. Where each side start to one up each other. Instead of trying to meet this balance, balance of power where you just have equal amount of military force, people start to try to overtake each other. And one fine day, we'll reach this point where everybody starts to wonder, why things turn out this way? Why do we have to be in a Cold War, or to be even in a war? And and then that's also when dictators start to happen. So you can see the very Stalin-like mustache and the Hitler mustache. The only way is to be balanced. Is no matter, like, you can be big country, small country, but through alliances, through friendship, it is possible to be balanced. However, remember, there is no moral and ethics in geopolitics, which means that there is no such thing as it's a bad thing to attack me, so you should not attack me. That's what Ukraine subscribed to, and of course, that's why you're now hearing me talk. So I really love this quote by Cersei Lannister, which is what I put in my email footer. Power is power. There's nothing more. There's nothing else. It's just power, and no ethics, no moral, no tactics, no smartness, intelligence can defeat true power. When a person can decide your life and death, they can decide your life and death. And that's what Cersei Lannister showed to Littlefinger. in the Game of Thrones. So let's look at Ukraine and Russia now. So why I talk about balance of power first, because that is the basis of everything in geopolitics. And that is the only way you can understand how the war can end. And this how the war has started. So there is a conundrum between Russia and Ukraine. So the Russia views the West. So somehow the West is involved as very antagonistic to the Russians. And Ukraine themselves is extremely anti-Russia since 2014. Because Russia have annexed Crimea, and of course Russia has somewhat backed Donbass, the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republic. And since then, Ukraine tried to join the NATO. And in fact, they have been trying to join the NATO before that. And Ukraine in NATO will actually unbalance the entire balance of power between NATO and Russia. In fact, before the war started, NATO and Russia is already an unbalanced power. That is not, is already unbalanced. NATO is overwhelmingly more powerful than Russia. And the only thing that is saving Russia is nuclear weapon. And this is also the reason why Europe has been really slack, and coming to defense spending, which is why Trump has been trolling the European countries. And then people are saying, Trump is crazy and whatnot. And then today we start to see Europe doing exactly what Trump asked them to do, to raise their military spending. And why is this happen? Because they know, all of Europe know, that NATO is overwhelmingly more powerful than Russia. And this is also why Russia cannot allow Ukraine to join NATO, but at all costs. Because Ukraine itself is one of the biggest military power in Europe, other than Russia. They are almost as big as Turkish military. And Turkey itself is already the second biggest military in NATO. And if Ukraine joined, they will be among the top 3 biggest army in NATO, and that will absolutely unbalance the entire balance of power between NATO and Russia. And not to mention, Ukraine is already very anti-Russia, and NATO, of course, they are definitely going to make full use of Ukraine as the front line. And of course, they have no choice. Geographically speaking, they are on the front line. And Russia is definitely very worried that if Ukraine is part of NATO, then Ukraine might trigger a war so that they can make use of NATO, actually is USA, to destroy Russia. And Russia will not be able to defend against a war against the entire might of NATO. But on the Ukraine side, their view is different. They are more looking within. They are looking at Russia as the aggressor because they annexed Crimea and backed the separatists in Donetsk and Luhansk. And there is also this balance of power broken within Ukraine itself. Because after the Crimea has been annexed and Donbass broke away, the entire voting power for the pro-Russian side is broken. So in the past, it used to be rather balanced between pro-Russia and pro-West. But because of the loss of Donbass voters and loss of Crimean voters, it has become absolutely pro-West. So Ukraine will forever be pro-West. And this is because the lack of anti-Russia voters, and lack of pro-Russia voters in Crimea. I think I typed wrongly here. So, I think I typed correctly. So anyway, and then it got worse because in 2015, Ukraine started to be rearmed, retrained, and militarized by the West. So we all know that NATO has training centers. They have been training the Ukrainian forces. But why? Why is the West so interested in training the Ukrainians? So, and this is why the West has stopped being a neutral party to resolve the Donbass crisis or the Donbass civil war or whatever you want to call it. And this rise, and then there's also another part to it. There's a rise in power among the ultra-nationalists and the extremist group within Ukraine. It's not like they are they will be voted by a lot of people. It's not true. but they have clout, they have power, they have guns. And it is extremely difficult to use whatever laws that Ukraine have to actually curb them. And not to mention, they might be backed by some oligarchs or whatever. So, and this includes Zelensky. In one of these very famous videos, Zelensky tried to talk to I think some of the ultra nationalists in Donbass area, and then he got like humiliated or something. So there is no good guys in this conflict, not even the Europeans. So you guys watching here, you are not a good guy. So the OSCE supposed to be a neutral party that is monitoring the Minsk agreement and this demilitarization of the Donbass area to try to bring peace to the region. But since this report in April 2016, which is actually a detailed report of interviews done in late 2014 and until January of 2015. And that this report only launched in April 2016. It took a year to write a report. So ridiculous. And this is actually on the war crimes of the Ukraine armed forces. And I read through the whole thing. I lost part of my soul. And since then, there is no longer a follow-up report. So this is the second report. We never saw a third report. So since 2015, even OSCE is no longer neutral. So Europe is no longer neutral. You can actually go and download this yourself. This link is authentic, in case you think that I'm making this up. So let's go to the current war situation and projection. Let me pull the map. Okay. So the current situation. So in case you need I just do a very quick intro into what happened in the beginning. The Russians started at 5 different fronts. There is I call them the Kiev front, Sumy front, Kharkiv front, the Donbass front, and the Crimea front. And since then, the Russians have withdrawn from the Kiev front and the Sumy front. You probably have known. So the Ukrainians are really happy about it. And there's only the Kharkiv front, the Donbass front, and the southern front, which I now changed to the Taurida front, which I don't really use that term. So the Russians have captured the entire of Kherson Oblast, probably 95% of it, and also more than half of Zaporizhia front, Zaporizhia Oblast, so the region. So the Russians seems to be really keen to keep this place, and the entire front line really is very stalemate. I think I have lost my track. So anyway, so the Ukrainians have tried a few offensives in the Kherson area. They had largely failed. This did not really get the kind of success that they want. If you can see the front line in the southern front is along the river, and this is how the Russians have maintained this position, and the Ukrainians are still trying very hard to find a way to break through. Although there are rumors that they might be launching a major counter-offensive soon, but this from the pro-Russian side, this news. So not sure if it is true or not. And at the Zaporizhia front, there is a lot of fighting around Huaipo and stuff like this, but from my opinion, the Russians seem to just doing it for fun. They don't seem to be interested to push further. And the Ukrainians are trying very hard to fight this place, but any offensive that tried by the Ukrainians also has been broken. The Russians did try to advance further around the Velika Novosilka area, because this is actually part of the Donetsk Oblast. So this line is actually the Donetsk border. So the Russians did, however, try to attack northward from here, but they are not very interested in this area. I think they are very happy with this capture now. And in the Donetsk front and the Luhansk front, this area is where most of the fighting is. You can see all these blue icons, if you are not acquainted to my videos or my coverage, all these are fortification and entrenchment by the Ukrainians before the war started. And in fact, this might be a few years old. These are all captured from Google Maps. You can see some trenches here. Some of them are much bigger. You can see this is a proper fortification. So there is a lot of them, and you can see it's across the entire border, the pre-war border and pretty much the Russians are mostly trapped and stuck by this border in a big part of this area, especially in Donetsk and all the way to the north. These are all newer entrenchment in this blue area. This is because the Russians attacked from Crimea and from Russia, and they encircled in Mariupol and then they pushed upwards and then they got stuck here. This is a newer entrenchment. So okay, so I don't want to go into details. If not, I will be doing a summary. So the Russia, and then, okay, so there's a lot of so the Russians are also pushing down from Izium. So this is a very major point, because after this point, they can actually spread out. And the Ukrainians are actually doing a counteroffensive in the Kharkiv region, trying to recapture a lot of ground, but it's not exactly wise because it is inconsequential to the overall of the war, and it's too close to the Russian border. The current situation is that the Russian forces, or Donetsk People's Republic forces, or they like to call themselves the Combined Force or something like this. They have been moved, having a lot of progress. They successfully taken Popasna, and then they punched through into the rear of the Ukrainian lines. And it does have the feeling that the Ukrainian defenses is starting to crumble. And they seemingly are unable to hold the lines as well as they used to do. And although the front line in the north is much harder for the Russians, they seems to be still holding very well, the Ukrainians. And of course, there's a major fight for several Donetsk. Everything else here is pretty much a stalemate. There is a huge push for Avdiivka, but it's still not doing far well enough. But in my projection is that it's inevitable that the Russians will conquer the entire of Donbass. It's just a matter of time. The overwhelming firepower in terms of missile troops, heavy machineries like tanks, artillery, in terms of air superiority, there is just the Ukrainians just cannot match. Even with the foreign aids and the foreign equipments, the amount of equipment that is being sent to the Ukrainians is insufficient. 100 pieces of artillery is nothing, because anything that comes from Poland, they will have to travel like 900 kilometers to go to the front. And halfway through, half of them will be destroyed by airstrike or missile strikes. So this is not looking very good for the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians, however, did have an advantage, which is in manpower. The mobilization will probably, I estimate it's probably they will have around 1 million soldiers, but 1 million soldiers have to guard all the borders from Belarus all the way to the Russian border. And then they have to guard Odessa, Mykolaiv. They have to cover the entire front line. So when you spread it out, it's still pretty even. And the Ukrainians are now struggling really hard, and the lines are broken. It's starting to break. We can see a lot of push out, like this horse-looking front line. And as we speak, the Russians are still pushing outwards. So let's not talk too much. You can actually go to my channel to watch the summary. So let's not dwell too long on this map. I want to go back to this. So that's the projection. So how do we end this war? So the cessation and negotiation. So it all depends on the balance of power again. So however, this is not within the hands of Ukraine. Ukraine can never be balanced against Russia because the war has started. Then no one will be in an alliance with them. And so whatever the Ukrainians want is no longer relevant or actionable. It is up to the West, actually, the NATO forces, the NATO, United States, European Union, to decide when the war should end. Unless they enter the war themselves, then this war will never end. So the only way the war can end now is by the cessation of support for Ukraine's war effort. This is very similar to the previous speaker, the war in Ukraine, saying that how Ukraine will fight to the end, and I will actually talk a bit on that later. So, however, on the Russian side, they have no reasons to actually stop their military operation until they get what they want. So they want what they want. They want demilitarization of Ukraine. They want a denazification of Ukraine. Basically, a stop at capturing of all the extremist groups. They want neutrality in Ukraine, and they want the liberation of Donbass and recognition of Crimea. However, what I also think is that they will want the independence of the Zaporizhia and Kherson region, which they have already captured. And in fact, they might actually just annex it into the Russian Federation to protect this region, because you make it a People's Republic, make it an independent country, they might actually turn into another Ukraine in some distant future. So they might think of annexation, perhaps. But what is sure is that the longer this war fights, the smaller Ukraine is going to be, because Ukraine is not going to win this war, unfortunately, as far as I can tell. And this is where I want to talk about the Ukraine's situation. Ukraine's hands are tied. Zelensky himself has no option to surrender. He can't, even if he wants to surrender, he cannot, because he can be assassinated because there is extremist elements within Ukraine, probably within the government, in the military. They are ultra-nationalists, extremists, which the moment he signs away, he can be assassinated. And even if he's not assassinated, after the war, he will be impeached, or he will be arrested for treason, because he signed away the land of Ukraine. So there is no option for Zelensky to surrender. The only way is for him to just fight to the very last Ukrainians who is willing to fight. I wouldn't say the very last Ukrainian, because not everyone will fight, but until the very last Ukrainian that is willing to fight. So there is no military option or possibility to reconquer Crimea or Donbass. It's not possible, because if it's doable, then Crimea would already been reconquered. It's just not doable. No European country is going to send their soldiers to die for Crimea. No one will die for Crimea. No one will die for Ukraine, except for the Ukrainians themselves. And what's worse is that the Ukrainians have accumulated a lot of debt in just 3 months of war. And this is like a gambler who went to gamble, and then he lost, and then he just doubled down and hoping for a miracle, because he already know that he's lost. He's just trying his best, try to have one miracle. And that's what the Ukrainians is doing now. They are just throwing everything out of the window and just doing their best. And in the post-war Ukraine, they will lose most of its population. They will lose most of its farming and industrial capability, which means that the ability to recover is also gone, or at least very, very hard. They will be worse than Greece. So what is the post-Ukraine war reality that we all have to accept? Okay, based on my opinion of what things are and will be, so the reality might not be the same for you, is that Russia is here to stay. There's no possibility, at least from the current juncture, from the current point that we look at the situation, that Russia will vanish. It's not possible. Rubles, the sanctions have not killed the rubles. It only make it stronger because of the defensive actions by the Russian Federation. And 500 million people depends on Russian and Ukrainian wheat. And there is no Ukrainian wheat now. It's all not planted. Most of them is not planted. And the ones that are planted are mostly in Russian territory, or Russian controlled territory, I think. And there is a gas pipeline that Europe's need, and they are strong. And then you have the gold reserve. The Russians have a lot of gold reserve. They are prepared for this war. You look from 2014, they are at 1,000. You can see that at 2022, they already have doubled the gold reserve. They are preparing for this war as well. So Ukraine is not the only one that is preparing for this war. And not what's worse for Europe, because now I'm addressing mostly Europe audience, is that the Russian military is still very strong. Even despite the amount of troops that they have sent into Ukraine, there is still enough to fight the rest of Europe. And this is a Kinzhal missile, this is a hypersonic missile, which can have a nuclear payload, which means that at any time, if Putin decides to assassinate any world leader, he can do it and you are dead. Hypersonic missile, there's no way you can stop it. And you have the ICBM, which is also hypersonic, which currently no one has the ability to stop. And so they are likely to become stronger and they're going to be more assertive in the future. That is the reality of the post-Ukraine war Russia. So what you guys in Italy or in Europe should think about? So in my opinion, things is going to get very bad for Europe. There will be a fundamental reconsideration about the identity of Europe and the alignment the European countries have to stand, and the relevance of Europe to the world. So because of this Ukraine war, a lot of the weaknesses of Europe start to appear. So now you have the gas, oil, fuel crisis. It's something to do with supply, something to do with high pricing. Then because of that, you have energy problems. You have food crisis because they depend so much on imports. Then you have high inflation because of all the sanctions. And then because of this Ukraine war, a ridiculous amount of propaganda and misinformation that is pro-Ukraine and anti-Russia has appeared. This has disillusioned a fraction, not all, but a fraction of the population. And somehow US leadership has been really unreliable. Biden has not been showing proper leadership in this entire crisis. And Russia refused to disappear. They just wouldn't disappear. And then you have debt from Ukraine that is not recoverable. And then because of all these things that had happened, there will be a huge, massive loss of faith in political leadership within the respective European countries. And currently, there is also the inability to match Russia militarily because of the hypersonic weapons. So, which means you can't even fight Russia. Even you have a stronger conventional force in NATO, you cannot fight Russia because you cannot defeat the hypersonic missiles. And because of this conflict, then NATO is now under massive expansion. Every NATO country is increasing their defense spending. So it's expensive, and that is going to cost the taxpayer again. And then you have also the breaking of the European Union because some members do not agree with the European Union's direction, and the entire integrity of European Union is now in danger. So, or at least not in danger, but there's some fracture there. And then you have the refugee crisis. And I'm not talking about the Middle Eastern one. I'm talking about the Ukrainian ones. Because when the Ukrainians move to all these Western countries, why would they return to Ukraine? That is a big question. So my final question, this is the final slide actually. I never full screen, oh my God. So would you, if you're European, would you continue this anti-Russia stance if there is no US backing? If US do not back you? And is it a good foreign policy to depend on US backing to deal with Russia? And what happened if USA does not honor their words? Like what happened to Ukraine? Ukraine is sent to go to war with Russia with a lot of promises from the NATO countries, from United States, from EU. You say we'll back you, and then when Ukraine go to war and continue to entice Russia into a war, and then they realize that they are being lied to. In the end, they are the one that have to suffer everything, and the rest of Europe just say sorry. We cannot expand this war. We cannot afford to have a war between NATO and Russia. So would you be friends with Russia? You see, what if Joe Biden just say, "Come on, man, we can't risk a war with Russia"? What would you do? So this is the end of my presentation. I hope you like it, and that's all.
Oh, perfect. I will give you 2 fast questions, and then we will move to the last speech.
Okay.
Okay. So perfect. Okay. First is how do you see the war ending? How do you envision a peace treaty? But we already talked about it. So saying that Ukraine had a weak and certain position in Crimea means that all the agreement mean nothing, Budapest Memorandum or security assurance, for example. Is it right? So all the agreements are useless. So does that can mean that if Russia tries to attack Lithuania or Poland, will not be any NATO answer? So let's stay on this one, but it's and then we will move to the last speech and question and answer.
Yeah, okay. I think it's a good question. So that's why I talked about the balance of power. For any negotiation to work out, you need to have a balance of power. And the whole point of Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia, making so much noise is because they have the backing of NATO. Under normal circumstances, these three countries will never say a bad thing about Russia. Never. They just cannot afford to. But because of the NATO backing, because of US backing, they are making so much noise, and they are trying to they are antagonizing Russia constantly, like what Ukraine has been doing for the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And that is not a good thing. Which is why I asked the last question about what if United States decided not to back Europe? Because the next election, Trump is going to come back. There is no clear candidate against Trump at this current moment. Trump is going to come back. He's going to win. And he is a realist, much like me. He's not going to say, oh, for European cohesion or NATO integrity or whatever. He's not going to do that. He's just going to make the best decisions for his own country. And he's going to make a deal with Putin. And if United States decided to withdraw from NATO or to say that they will not protect any countries who try to purposely antagonize Russia, then the countries like Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, and even Poland will be in some kind of a no man's land, you see. And that's why every negotiation, every agreement have to be backed with military force, have to be backed with balance of power, have to be backed with recognition by all the major powers. Without that, then it's pointless. So even in we look at the Minsk agreements for Ukraine, the Minsk agreement is there is Russia in it, there is European Union in it to sign this agreement. But as long as one side decides not to follow through, not to back it, then the agreement is pointless. And this is why you cannot run away from power. That's why Russia have to do something to show that the agreements have to mean something. If not, worse things can happen. And if not, the worst thing will happen to Russia. So this is my answer to that question.
Okay, perfect. So we will do the last speech, and thank you for your speech. And then I collected all the main questions, and I will put at the end.
Okay.
Buon, vieni che c'è un po' di luce.
Hi, Guy. Good evening. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Stefano Ambrosini for his beautiful job this evening and for all the effort he put in the field in the last weeks following the Ukrainian-Russian crisis and the efforts that he spent in order to create more connections between people speaking, thinking in a different way. So thank you very much, Stefano, and thank you for to invite me this evening. I would like to introduce shortly me. I am not an expert or an academic of international relations. My opinions are coming from the fields. I am a former export manager. Then I was an international relation manager in small and medium Italian enterprises. I spent 9 years in Brussels in European Union Committee, and I was for 12 years, if I remember well. I am a little bit aged. Vice President for International Relations in an Italian Association of Entrepreneurs. So my point of view is quite different from the ones that I heard this evening about the military side and the political picture. And I can't enter with a little bit of deeply analysis in this field. I would like to discuss on the big picture. And the only thing that I would like to underline is my deeply different point of view from Mr. Wyatt. He's a really clever guy, but I think that we have to discuss more about the matters he put on the table. And I think that our point of view are really very, very different. But we cannot discuss it this evening. I really appreciate the opportunity to discuss with you in the future, maybe in another situation. And second, I have to excuse me due to the fact that I'm going to have my speech in Italian language. This because I would like to be more clear with people coming from my country, because in my country we have really a lot of discussion about what is happening. I think that these discussions are very, very clear, very, very interesting, and are the most important things in democracy. We have a clear idea about what democracy is, but we have a more clear idea of what a liberal democracy is. Liberal democracies are deeply different from the others, and I think that we need more freedom, the freedom of speech, the freedom of things, more than in other countries, and we are very happy of it. So I think that all the differences that we have in Italy are rich things and not a problem. Sorry, Sus, if I would like to go in advance with my speech in Italy. I think that Stefano will give you the opportunity, if you would like to ask my point of view, in the next days in order to have a direct translation. I think that you will prepare it in YouTube, so okay. Anyway, thank you very much for your courtesy. Parlando invece ai miei amici italiani, io credo che abbiamo ascoltato veramente un attimo una serie di punti di vista molto interessanti che arricchiscono molto il nostro dibattito. Però io vorrei fare anche un breve quadro della situazione partendo dall'inizio e cercando di mettere in fila i tasselli. Perché guardate che una guerra non è una accozzaglia di battaglioni che vanno sul campo e si scannano, non è quello. Una guerra comincia quando finisce la politica e finisce quando ricomincia la politica, ma la politica è una cosa che segue, tra virgolette, tutta l'evoluzione. La guerra è una cosa che ha degli aspetti di imprevedibilità che hanno probabilmente mandato all'aria i piani di molti. Cominciamo con dire che la Russia ha cominciato a ragionare su questa guerra. Perdonate, io parlerò di Russia, non parlerò di Russia e non parlerò di Putin, perché secondo me la Russia è un insieme di gruppi dirigenti. Non possiamo imputare quello che è accaduto semplicemente a Putin, né possiamo caricare le responsabilità nei confronti dei russi. Quindi io parlerò di Russia. La Russia ha cominciato a costruire la sua posizione di forza, la Comprehensive National Power, già da molti anni, e l'ha costruita in modo intelligente su punti molto differenti. Prima di tutto ha riaperto una serie di basi militari. La base militare in Siria è stata la prima riaperta dopo la caduta del muro ed è certamente stata una base militare che permette alla Russia di rimettere i piedi dopo molti anni all'interno dell'area del Mediterraneo, che sappiamo essere un'area molto delicata. La questione invece del petrolio e delle miniere è una cosa molto più delicata, perché è molto più legata, tolto gli accordi internazionali, alle operazioni che la Russia ha messo in campo attraverso il gruppo Wagner. Il gruppo Wagner, come sapete, ma come avete visto anche da alcune di quelle cartine presentate anche da Mr. Wyatt, si è molto espanso in termini di attività. Sappiamo benissimo in Libia, sappiamo benissimo in Centrafrica, sappiamo in Mali, ma lo ha fatto in una logica non semplicemente di esercito di mercenari, perché il gruppo Wagner non è pagato in dollari, in rubli. Il gruppo Wagner è pagato con concessioni minerarie. Quindi di fatto è un'operazione di imperialismo militare. Vado avanti? È un'operazione di imperialismo, tra virgolette, fatta in un modo completamente diverso, utile a costruire una diversa proiezione internazionale, un diverso posizionamento internazionale della Russia. Le questioni relative, che pure contribuiscono alla comprehensive national power, che è una qualcosa di più rispetto al problema del balance of power riportato da Mr. Wyatt, hanno a che fare con le posizioni del gas che ben conosciamo, dove naturalmente l'idea delle economie liberali di riuscire a creare strette connessioni economiche, perché questi erano il presupposto per avere una globalizzazione pacifica, non hanno retto, perché mentre noi consideravamo l'economia un punto di riferimento, c'è qualcuno che ha detto no, guardate, l'economia non conta, conta la politica, riportando in campo gli obiettivi nazionali. E questa è un'operazione che la Russia ha saputo compiere con grandissima intelligenza. Non l'ha fatto soltanto sul gas e sul petrolio, l'ha fatto anche sul grano, come bene abbiamo visto in questi mesi, ma chi sa e conosce queste materie sapeva che questa operazione era in corso evidentemente da molto più tempo. L'ha fatto sui fertilizzanti, dove vi inviterei a riflettere su questa stranissima esplosione nella principale fabbrica di fertilizzanti, non in Russia come tutti penserebbero, ma negli Stati Uniti a metà gennaio. In North Carolina, il più grande produttore di fertilizzanti, ha avuto un problema sensibile. La sua produzione non ripartirà per prima di 1 anno e mezzo, e questo era il maggior concorrente di bielorussi, ucraini e russi in termini di produzione di fertilizzanti. Da ultimo, altro aspetto molto importante in termini di comprehensive national power è stata la comunicazione. In Italia sappiamo benissimo in quale modo si è dipanata questa straordinaria capacità di penetrazione messa in campo dalla Russia. Sappiamo che questo è capitato molto negli Stati Uniti, il terrore degli Stati Uniti sui rischi elettorali, grandi allarmi si sono avuti in Germania e in Francia, ma al di là del rischio elettorale in sé, il fatto stesso che se ne dovesse parlare fa capire qual è stata la grande capacità e intelligente capacità di penetrazione russa. Da ultimo, la questione del petrolio. Non vi è dubbio che uno dei motivi che hanno suggerito alla Russia di aprire questa avventura sono i pessimi rapporti tra gli Stati Uniti e i tradizionali produttori e fornitori di petrolio del Medio Oriente. Peggiori di questi non si erano mai visti negli ultimi 50 anni, al punto tale da mettere la Russia nelle condizioni di pensare che forse questo era il momento buono per fare cosa? Per far saltare gli equilibri di politica internazionale che invece erano stati fissati prima dagli accordi di Helsinki, poi dalla Carta di Parigi, poi dalla Carta di Astana, poi dagli accordi di Budapest, tutte cose che avevano costruito il sistema di sicurezza europeo. Il principio di fondo era quella che la mia sicurezza non può essere a scapito della tua sicurezza e che di conseguenza si doveva trovare un equilibrio tra le sicurezze dei due paesi. Era il principio di fondo che minava, faceva saltare per aria le teorie imperialistiche che noi ben conosciamo in Europa, in Occidente, e che abbiamo combattuto e pagato pesantemente tra il XIX e il XX secolo. L'idea appunto di dire che rispetto alle sfere di influenza si giocava sul fatto che la sfera di influenza è uno strumento imperialista, mentre la capacità di avere una sicurezza bilanciata tra due paesi doveva essere il nuovo equilibrio. Questo però cozzava, è un principio che cozza potentemente con chi decide che c'è stato Versailles, ma c'è stata anche la caduta del muro e la vendetta va portata fino in fondo. La Russia ha avuto veramente una grandissima capacità di costruire silenziosamente, con intelligenza, con perizia, con capacità diplomatiche, con capacità presenti sul territorio a livello globale, la sua posizione per mettergli nelle migliori condizioni di spedire 200.000 uomini sul confine ucraino, dicendo apertamente una cosa: che se tu spedisci 200.000 uomini al confine di un paese non lo fai per fare una scampagnata, lo fai perché quei 200.000 uomini li userai. cosa sulla quale gli occidentali, eccetto gli americani e gli inglesi, non erano molto convinti, ma che in effetti si è verificata. La seconda cosa è quel documento che è ancora parzialmente riservato, che fu spedito da Lavrov, dal ministro degli esteri Lavrov alla NATO intorno a metà di dicembre, un documento in 10 punti che indicava la richiesta di un nuovo equilibrio della sicurezza in Europa, documento che non è mai stato pubblicato né dai russi né dagli americani né dalla NATO, e di cui abbiamo una traccia soltanto su una fuga di notizie pubblicata da El País, quotidiano spagnolo, intorno al 17 di dicembre, se ben ricordo. E in quel documento saltano fuori in quei 3 punti su 10, quei famosi punti a cui Lavrov chiedeva una risposta scritta, saltavano fuori 3 richieste. La prima era il ritiro delle truppe NATO dai Baltici ai Balcani. Cioè in tutti i paesi, le new entry all'interno della NATO non dovevano esserci non tanto basi NATO, che già oggi non ci sono in gran parte di questi paesi, ma doveva essere ritirata anche la presenza militare, cosa che ad esempio ai Baltici creava un problema non secondario, perché anche per ragioni demografiche gli rimaneva soltanto la polizia a disposizione. Secondo era la chiusura dei 2 centri, quello già operativo e quello che sarebbe dovuto entrare in funzione, di allarme e di difesa antimissile, uno in Romania e l'altro in Polonia, perché per quanto non avessero capacità offensive, avevano la capacità di bloccare una eventuale rappresaglia o un first strike nucleare da parte della Russia. E la terza cosa era la richiesta di denuclearizzare l'Europa, ovvero i paesi europei già nucleari, quindi sostanzialmente esclusivamente Francia e Regno Unito avrebbero potuto continuare a detenere la loro deterrenza nucleare, ma nessun altro ordigno nucleare sarebbe potuto essere posizionato, che so, in Italia, in Germania, in Belgio, dove oggi sono già presenti. Questo, unito a dichiarazioni uscite sui giornali fatte con grande franchezza, dove si dichiarava che l'obiettivo russo era quello di spostare l'equilibrio di forze, l'equilibrio geopolitico da Occidente, da un Occidente visto al tramonto, a un Oriente rising power, che fosse la Cina e la Russia e l'India, con l'India è un discorso in realtà da fare completamente a parte. È evidente che quello che veniva messo sul campo aveva un aspetto tattico che era la partita ucraina, ma l'aspetto vero, guardate, non sono i carro armati in Donbass o da dove arrivano i battaglioni. Il problema vero è che quello che viene posto dai russi sul tavolo è qual è il nuovo equilibrio di sicurezza che può esserci tra una Russia con velleità imperiali e una Unione Europea considerata una potenza declinante. E qualsiasi condizione di pace, in questo è uno dei punti di disaccordo con Mr. Wyatt, qualsiasi condizione di pace non riguarda il ritiro dal Donbass o la Crimea. Guardate, queste sono le cose che potremo leggere sui giornali. Il vero equilibrio della pace è la ricerca e la trattativa sul nuovo sistema di sicurezza tra Occidente e la Russia. Qui è il motivo per cui voi avete una risposta molto dura da parte di inglesi e americani, che forse hanno capito più di altri quella che è la vera sfida che la Russia ha lanciato all'Occidente e che decidono di giocare la partita fino in fondo. Qui vedete anche quella che è la reazione avuta da Svezia e Finlandia, perché parliamoci chiaro, per quale motivo 2 paesi storicamente neutrali, ma dotati di eserciti potenti, molto più potenti dell'esercito ucraino, che già ha messo in difficoltà l'armata convenzionale russa, devono decidere dopo 70 anni di abbandonare la neutralità e entrare sotto il cappello della NATO, ma per un solo motivo, non convenzionale, quello nucleare. Quello che viene chiesto da Svezia e Finlandia è l'apertura dell'ombrello nucleare, quindi della dissuasione e del no first strike, ma della capacità di dissuasione nucleare nei confronti della Russia. Se no, guardate, non c'è nessun motivo per cui realmente debbano entrare all'interno della NATO. Perché? Perché alla fine purtroppo la proliferazione nucleare in questi anni c'è stata. Guardate, prendete, ci divertiamo tanto con le cartine. Bene, a memoria, prendete un bel mappamondo, partite dalla Kamchatka. La Kamchatka, estremo oriente, Pacifico, Nord Pacifico, voi avete la potenza nucleare russa. Scendete, trovate la Cina che è nucleare, scendete ancora, trovate la India che è nucleare, scendete ancora, vi spostate, trovate il Pakistan che è nucleare. Guardate che siamo senza soluzione di continuità. Arrivate all'Iran, che è una potenza nucleare in fieri. Poco più a sud avete l'Arabia Saudita, il cui nucleare non c'è, ma è quello che è stato pagato al Pakistan, perché è il Pakistan che ha fatto la ricerca nucleare con i finanziamenti sauditi. Trovate Israele che nega di essere nucleare, però, come dire, qualche dubbio oggettivamente c'è, e ci troviamo alle porte dell'Europa, perché la Turchia ha chiuso un trattato nucleare di ricerca nucleare civile con la Russia, esattamente come lo ha chiuso l'Egitto, che ha ripristinato qualche anno fa il suo centro di ricerca nucleare nel Mediterraneo. Quindi voi vi trovate di fronte a una situazione in cui i primi che finirono sotto l'ombrello nucleare sono in realtà gli ultimi ad averlo, perché tutti gli altri paesi hanno conoscenze balistiche. Avevo dimenticato la Corea del Nord. Hanno conoscenze tecnologiche balistiche, hanno conoscenze di uso del nucleare. Quindi il futuro che noi abbiamo di fronte è un futuro nel quale noi dobbiamo andare a ridiscutere con la Russia, ma in realtà anche con i suoi sponsor, molto tiepidi, perché la Cina ha uno sponsor molto tiepido rispetto all'inizio del conflitto, quali sono i nuovi equilibri di sicurezza. Per questo io sono assolutamente convinto che questa è un'operazione, che è una guerra che non finirà presto, perché nessuno in questo momento è in condizione né di mettere sul tavolo né di accettare un livello di trattativa così elevato e così complesso, perché il resto, guardate, purtroppo è sangue, che è il sangue della guerra, ma è tutto sommato abbastanza semplice da trovare in termini di equilibrio. L'equilibrio tra sistemi che in realtà divergono è un problema politico molto serio. Quali sono le conseguenze dal punto di vista economico? Beh, è ovvio che le sanzioni hanno conseguenze su chi le fa e chi le subisce, tendenzialmente molto più su chi le subisce. È ovvio che, avendo la Russia avuto la capacità di impostare un'operazione che non era una guerra mondiale, ma è stata una guerra globale, proprio per la sua Comprehensive National Power Policy, quella che ha messo in campo in questi anni e che ha coinvolto gran parte del globo terracqueo, le conseguenze non possono che essere conseguenze economiche molto pesanti. E lo saranno evidentemente per tutti, per l'Occidente un po' meno, per altri paesi probabilmente un po' di più. In questo, come può essere la reazione di Europa, Stati Uniti e di altre potenze? Io credo che il discorso del ministro delle finanze Lindner, tedesco, poco dopo lo scoppio della guerra, quando ha detto è finita un'epoca, la questione la storia non è finita, come diceva Francis Fukuyama, ma ci troviamo in una situazione in cui le liberal democrazie dovranno ricominciare a fare affari tra di loro in molto, molto più stretto. E quindi i vecchi disegni del TTP e del TTIP, dei due grandi progetti di integrazione, di creazione di un'area di libero scambio tra Europa e Stati Uniti e tra Pacifico e Stati Uniti, e quindi inevitabilmente un'operazione di libero scambio, un mercato di libero scambio che va dal Giappone all'Ucraina, per dare un esempio molto completo, diventerà uno degli obiettivi dei prossimi anni. Ed è evidente che tutti questi trattati commerciali di colossale importanza avranno sopra una decisione politica molto precisa, ma sotto avranno sottesi degli accordi militari. Questo significa che noi in futuro escluderemo la Cina e altre grandi potenze. Non è solo la Cina grandi potenze in crescita, sappiamo ce ne sono altre grandi potenze dal mercato. No, ma che certamente i rapporti non saranno esattamente quelli di prima. Non saranno così liberi e aperti come sono stati in questi anni. Come si collocherà la Russia? Certo che la Russia continuerà a esistere, però è evidente che in un disegno di questo genere il suo ruolo rispetto a quello che poteva essere sarà un ruolo fortemente depotenziato. Ne siamo felici, ci piangiamo? Guardate, noi eravamo quelli, e sto finendo Stefano, noi eravamo quelli che Alla guerra non credevamo, nel senso non perché la vedevamo avanzare, ma dicevamo di no, ma proprio non ci pensavamo. Credo che una delle cose che ci rendono in questo momento più lontano dalla Russia è esattamente la convinzione che credo che nessuno di noi avrebbe mai pensato nella propria esistenza, ma nemmeno in quella dei propri figli, di trovarsi nelle condizioni di mettersi in una guerra con la Russia. Questa differenza di valutazione, questa differenza di mentalità, questa differenza di obiettivi, e mi posso dire anche questa differenza culturale, è la vera sfida che abbiamo di fronte. Noi dobbiamo cercare di capire un po' meglio loro, che non significa giustificarli, anzi pagare gli errori, ma dobbiamo capire qualcosa di più di quello che è successo e avere la capacità di mettere sul campo qualche idea anche molto innovativa. Io mi fermerei qui perché ho voluto fare un quadro generale non di natura militare. Ve lo dico, il mio parere personale è che l'Ucraina non ha la capacità di fare contrattacchi nei confronti della Russia, perché come la Russia aveva un rapporto di forza che non è mai stato di 3-1, a un 2-1 in questo momento nel Donbass, e infatti fa fatica, l'Ucraina fino adesso si è difesa a 1, attaccare a 3 la vedo veramente complicata. Però questo è uno dei motivi per cui questa guerra, salvo fracassamenti, sarà molto lunga. Siamo innamorati noi della guerra? No, noi stiamo con Niccolò Machiavelli, che nell'arte della guerra fece dire al suo alter ego: noi siamo qui perché la nostra è l'arte del governo e ben amministrare il nostro popolo significa garantire la pace, ma per garantire la pace dobbiamo saper fare la guerra. Per capire l'Europa Machiavelli è molto importante, purtroppo per capire l'Italia è più utile Guicciardini e questo non mi ha mai fatto contento. Grazie. Vai.
Okay, so perfect. Thanks for everybody that waited. I will translate everything tomorrow in the YouTube video, and we'll translate everything in 3 languages with subtitles. So now it's like question and answer time. I try to make a little bit of let's say selection, but let's start from the beginning so we can make let's say 2 questions for every speak so we can give satisfaction to everybody. So okay. Okay, so it was like an internal question from Defense Policy and Politics Asia to the beginning. I think that it was to military summary. So it was today at 2:57 a.m. Okay, do you think that Ukraine is going to launch offensive in Kryvyi area? And after. Okay. Does you think that the recent Ukrainian offensive in Kherson will get anywhere? Okay. So this is like the 2 technical questions. And it was another one, but it's still the same. It's the same style. Will Ukraine launch a counteroffensive in Popasna? I think, as I said in the beginning, every speaker give his own point of view. So it's not the truth. So it's like 3 different point of view. And as one question became before, like there was only one speech in Italian from an Italian speaker, and all the others were not Italian. One from Belarus, one from Ukraine, one from Singapore. So we tried to make as more international as possible. So military summary, if you want to answer, and then we pass to the next. So it was about the cold room of Kryvyi, Popasna, and Kherson. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think that it's time to take a look at the map. So let's take a look at the map. According to the Russian sources, we can say that, as the DPA told us, that the Russians, they controlled around 95% of Kherson area. You see, there are just a few towns between the gray line and the green line. And these towns, we can say that they're in the gray zone. I'm not sure that anybody controls them because it's impossible to control such towns. These towns is under heavy artillery control, of course. They're shelling every day. And if anybody reach the town the next day or in a few hours, they're leaving this town because it's impossible to establish their positions. So about the Kryvyi Rih, let's talk about the Kryvyi Rih. On this, let's talk about Kryvyi Rih on this map. We can say that Kryvyi Rih is a very important area. You see these black lines, this is the railroads, right? And Kryvyi Rih is the center of two lines, of two railroads. One of them leads from Kryvyi Rih towards Zaporozhye, and another one leads from Kryvyi Rih to Dnipro. And Kryvyi Rih is connected with the central part of Ukraine, we can say like with the big land. One road leads towards Kiev, another one leads towards for example, Moldova and towards Pridnestrovye, Transnistria. So Kryvyi Rih is a very important area. And I think that Operation Kryvyi Rih depends on many factors. One of them is the situation with the supply of West ammunition. If the Russians understand that they cannot control the support, these supplies, they cannot like bomb every electric line, they can't bomb the stations, and if they see that the Ukrainians are able to move their support to the Donbass, of course they will be forced to do this operation to cut the supply roads. But another factor that explain this situation, of course, is the success in Donbass arc operation. Because if we are talking about the situation when we can see that Russians establish control over this territory, for example, so we are, for example, in a year or maybe in a two, we can see that the Russians establish control over this territory. So the question is, why shouldn't they start the Kryvyi Rih operation? It's a very nice position. You see that there is the railroad that leads through the Dnipro towards Kharkiv and toward the Russian Federation. And we know that one of their plans is to establish a stable channel between the between Odessa, Crimea, and Kherson with the rest of the Russian Federation. So of course, it's obviously they will do this as soon as they reach Dnipro and Zaporozhye. Many factors, many scenarios. The best scenario, of course, to establish control over Kryvyi Rih as soon after they establish control and solve the issue with the Donbass. And if there would be some problems with Kryvyi Rih, they will start this operation before that. So many options. And of course, we know that the Russians, they're concentrating their forces in the area from Kherson towards Arkhangelsk. In this area, they have around 20 battle tactical groups in this area. And another area they have a lot of forces is near this fortified area, Oreh, Gulyaye Polye, Velika Novoselovka. So we know that Ukrainians have their forces here and they're trying to stop the Russians. This is a very important area, by the way, Oreh, Gulyaye Polye, and Velika Novoselovka. This is the only towns in this area where the Ukrainians can hold and keep their artillery and heavy equipment. These big towns, they're prepared. If the Russians are able to establish control over these towns, over these sieges, over these castles. For example, if the Russians establish control over Gulyaye Polye, the Ukrainians, they don't have any positions on the north where they can establish such a nice position. For example, the nearest town is Pokrovsk, and Pokrovsk is located on 30 kilometers from Gulyaye Polye. So if the Russians are able to establish control over Gulyaye Polye, the closest position where the Ukraine can establish their fortified area is Pokrovsk, and it's very far from the front line. And this is just a field. This can be just a gray zone, and that nobody controls this gray zone. Or if Ukrainians are willing to control this territory, they will have to fight and they will have to face the Russian artillery and Russian commanders group. The same situation with Velika Novoselovka. If Ukrainians losing Velika Novoselovka, the next position where they can establish their fortified area is somewhere in the north, for example, Ivanovka or Kurakhov, but there is already a big fortified area. So another thing that from Velika Novoselovka, if we're talking moving to the north, it's around 30 kilometers. And the same situation with Oreh. So there is just Zaporozhye, the next situation, where the next place where the Ukrainians can establish their zone. So this is the reason why it's very nice position for the Ukrainians to start their two offensive operation from as most of West analytics says, from Kherson area towards Zaporozhye and from this area towards Zaporozhye. So it's possible, but it depends on many circumstances. Thank you.
So perfect. And now for war in Ukraine, I have two questions. It's like, do you think that, okay, 1 second, because the chat canceled everything. Okay. Because I have a lot of questions. So, do you think that NATO is off the table for Ukraine? Do you lend any credence to Russian believe that NATO is an anti-Russian alliance? And the other, it was okay. How do you verify that sanction crippled the Russian economy? How do you know that Russia want to have a territory of former SSSR? Do you think that the will of people is strong, blah, 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 whatever. And okay, last one. So one was about NATO and the position of NATO in the way of thinking about the Russian people, okay, let's say, and about the real effect of the sanction in the midterm. The last question, so these two are similar. How much did the fall of Azovstal affect the morale of Ukrainian fighters, and how was the Russian propaganda of abuse of Russian troops and bombing of Donbass civilian affect the morale of Russian people? So, war in Ukraine, it's your stand. Wait a sec. Perfect.
Let's actually, there are so many questions, and they are very different directions. Let's take one at a time, and maybe you can just say, okay, this is the question, and then I answer, and then we can.
Okay, so let's start with the last about, let's say, the effect of the morale of Ukraine about the fall of Azovstal, and it was how as the Russian propaganda of abuse of Russian troops and bombings of Donbass civilian affect the morale of Russian people. For sure, this is from Russia, let's say, question.
Okay, so well, I guess it's from the shoes of first Ukrainian side and then Russian side. So answering the question from Ukrainian side, because that's more comfortable for me, and you know, I can answer from Russian side, but that's just going to might be subjective opinion. So from Ukrainian side, the fall of Azovstal did not change the result of the fight. That's very short answer. And then from Russian side, the bombing and of the population, so-called. Well, we're not saying that that's actually really what's happening there, but basically, the question boils down: does Russian propaganda work on Russian people? And the short answer, yes, in general. Not everybody, but majority of people, they, in general, everywhere, they're very susceptible to propaganda in general, because they are taught in general not to think for themselves. That's just general societal approach everywhere. And so it does work on Russian population. That's why there is about 70% support for the current war in Russia. And we can debate, you know, there could be, you know, less, and that this polling is not reliable, whatever. We can see from the fact that there is, you know, large number of Russian troops and large number of people from Russia who are willing to die, right? They're willing to die. That really means that, you know, there is support for that, one way or another. So hopefully that was an answer for that question. Let's move to the next one.
So the other question was about let's say that a big conviction about a bit thought about a lot of Russian is that NATO, it's an anti-Russian alliance, not a defense, but when you're talking with a lot of Russians, they thought that, but it was also this question that NATO is not a defense, but it's an attack alliance.
Yeah,
So
it's not true.
so I know that it's not true from our point of view, but it was
no, but
question.
that's you know, it's in the eye of the person, right? You can say, I can say, hey, Stefano is a threat to me, right? You're not
Okay.
declaring that, but I view as a threat, right? And that's enough to start the war. So that's not you know, what you declare formally, it's not how things play out in general, right? So whether the NATO is, I don't think this is even really on the mind of majority of Russian population. This is largely by propaganda. It's more on the mind of the Russian, sort of call it political top or leadership, like the really the top, the decision makers in Russia, right? And then the population is properly then sort of prepared with the use of propaganda to have that point of view. So it's people just, it's too sort of abstract of a thought for average person everywhere. You know, us in Europe, us in the US, people really don't think about that level of, like, you know, it's too abstract for most people. Hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, I have the last question, and then I will pass to Defense Politics Asia. Do you see Ukraine gaining back all the lost territories, even Crimea? This is like about like the military point of view, or and the same that I already asked you in advance. What could be like the landing point of this war from, let's say, your military point of view?
Look, I mean, it's again a lot of speculation, right, at this point. So nothing is impossible in general, right? If Ukraine has a lot of changes, it can retake militarily the lost ground, right? But I mentioned this in my videos, and in general, like here, there is a lot of problem with Ukrainian middle and the top command lines, right? And the same actually true for Russia. They all product of the Soviet system, which is terribly inefficient and wrong in general. So that would prevent largely Ukraine from achieving a victory in one of the major factors, right? And the second one is the major one is lack of weapons, ammunition, and all that stuff. And the more important, lack of ability to produce them, because most of the facilities were destroyed, right? So it's total dependence at this point on the external support, and external support, as we discussed, can be always turned off on a whim, right? Let's say there is decision, okay, we tired with the war with Russia, let's stop it, you know, support stops, Ukraine suffocates, right? But at the end, it's that scenario is kind of like, okay, well, all it really means is that then you're going to have to fight with Russia on the Polish border, because it doesn't really stop there. Do you see what I mean? It's just, okay, then the Russian army becomes bigger. You add Ukraine to the Russian army, basically, right? So Russia becomes bigger, more powerful. And this is really what this is all about. This is not about saving people of Donbass or whatever other threat of NATO, right? I mean, you can see that NATO was close to Russia in the Baltic states for past, whatever, 12 or 50, whatever, 12 years or more. I think it's in mid-2000s, right, when they entered NATO. Like, look at the Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, it's even closer to Moscow than, let's say, Ukraine, right? Like distance-wise. It's probably like 400 kilometers to Moscow from Latvia, something like that, plus minus. So from the border of Latvia. So if you think about that, you know, Ukraine is not even joining, it's not even, you know, and then there is this attack. So it's very clear that this is all kind of just smoke and mirrors, basically, right, from the Russian side. And as we mentioned this before, this is all about the world order, right? They're not happy with the world order and they want to change it, right? And that's really what this game is all about. So hopefully that was the answer.
So thank you. Then I'm passing like to the audience question to defense politic agent. Then I have some last question, some question for the speakers. So for sure, like defense politics Asia has the, let's say, most far away view from the point, because you're from Singapore and whatever. At the end, I will have some question for you. But the question for the public was, how do you evaluate the possibility of a war between China and Taiwan, and the connection that could be, let's say, with a war in Ukraine? Like there was a lot of speculation about it. This is from the public, but this is my addition to the question. During the Olympic Games, let's say the meetings about Xi Jinping and Putin just before the war, and from my point of view, I'm only, let's say, a fan of geopolitics, but not a professional. It was for me a very big analogy of the Olympic Games in 2008 and the war in Georgia. It's something similar. And the question was, President Biden recently visited, around 2 days ago, my country. I don't know what country is from Jeminju, probably South Korea, and Taiwan. And he said he will protect Taiwan at any cost. Will there be a proxy war between US and China and Taiwan? So this is like question number one. So the China and Taiwan. And question number two, it's do you think that Ukraine will get sufficient weapons to mount an effective counteroffensive? And if it's so, how long it will take in your opinion? It's a similar, let's say, argument that was also in the war in Ukraine presentation. So this is the two questions that I wanted to give to you.
Okay. So it's about Taiwan, right? The first question is about Taiwan and China, right?
Yes.
So so the Taiwan and China situation is the same thing. It's coming down to the balance of power. So at the moment, in fact, for the past maybe 5 years, 10 years, China don't dare to invade. Firstly, militarily, they are still trying to modernize, trying to get the aircraft carriers, trying to find a way to have enough landing tanks and stuff. But the main deterrence is because Europe and USA both are very determined to deter China from trying at all. So China is actually very worried. So they worry that if they make any move, in fact, they are very worried that Taiwan will actually declare independence. So because for China, their red line was that if Taiwan declares independence, they will go to war. And in fact, China themselves is likely to be worried that Taiwan will actually declare independence, because China themselves actually don't want to go to war. They want to take over Taiwan peacefully as much as they can, because if China goes to war, then if they have any weaknesses within their military, it will be very obvious. Similar to what happened to Russia fighting Ukraine now. We do see that some of the invisibility, some of the assumptions about Russian military is actually broken, and the assumptions about Chinese military will be broken if they actually go to war with Taiwan. And however, that being said, whether USA will come to the aid of Taiwan is a question mark. There is no real proper alliance between Taiwan and USA, and US always have this very vague information, very vague posture about Taiwan. Like, we will come, we will not come, we will come, we will not come, that kind of thing. So, but I personally don't think China dares to do it, because China currently is facing a lot of internal problems, because they're going for a zero COVID policy, and that kind of just messed up everything for them. In fact, they should have a good year this year, but because of the COVID lockdown, they have kind of destroyed everything, and also messed up the whole global supply chain, and causing even more inflation around the world. So I'm not sure how much the Chinese people can take. Chinese people can take a lot of pain, and as we can see, the lockdown in Shanghai, the biggest city, people still have not revolted. People still have not went to protest, have not overthrown the government. So, but I believe, this is my personal belief, that the priorities is still trying to maintain what they have in China. Taiwan is actually not very, very important in the big picture, because the Chinese play the long game. They know that eventually Taiwan would collapse somehow, some way. Just like the Taiwanese believe that China themselves will collapse internally somehow someday. So it's as long as there is no sudden weakness, like for example Europe did maybe because of this Ukraine war, Europe collapsed. Europe go into a depression or heavy recession, and similarly in the US, and then suddenly everybody start to become very subservient to China, and then decided to roll back their words and not wanting to support Taiwan that much. Then we will see war becoming more likely, and it also depends on the reaction of South Korea, Japan, and India, whether they want to support Taiwan. So it's a very complicated web. Taiwan is a very complicated issue. But Taiwan themselves can defend themselves pretty decently as well. So because unlike Ukraine, there is a water barrier. It's not so easy to conquer Taiwan. The other question is about whether Ukraine can. What's the other question again? The military.
The question was if Ukraine is getting enough weapon to make a counterattack, and what is your position about this? It was like the same lack that war in Ukraine said that they have manpower. Like it's the opposite. Like that Russia has like a huge amount of stockpile of weapons, but no manpower, and then there's no constriction and no. Let's say a lot of people want really to go to war. In the opposite, the Ukrainians that are defending, they have more like morale, because they know the reason why they're making war. And the problem was the lack of military weapons. So if you think that the weapon that is coming from the West, it's enough for make a counteroffensive or not?
Okay, so my opinion, this is not a fact. This is just my opinion based on my observation. I think that all the Western equipment they sent to Ukraine is merely replacing what they have lost. In fact, I don't even think it's enough to replace what they have lost. So that is an important point to note. So what they have was only barely enough to hold back the Russians. The replacement is just merely only, again, just enough to hold back the Russians. It's unlikely to have sufficient to launch an offensive unless they're going to give up certain fronts. That means they're going to pull most of their equipment into one front and then make an offensive. Then maybe they will have enough. I think if you spread it across the entire front line, I don't think it's going to be enough for them. Because if you look at the numbers of heavy equipment that's being sent over, I mean, based on my vague feelings, that based on what I have seen, it doesn't seem that much. Unless they start to send them the real Western equipments, all those Western-made, not the old Soviet type, then maybe there is a change, like Abrams tanks and Bradley fighting vehicles, and then maybe there is some change because US have a lot of stockpile of those kind of weapons. But if you talk about the old Soviet types, those old Soviet tanks, T-72s, T-60s, and I think it wouldn't be enough. And those are all inferior weapons as well. But I agree that the manpower, Ukrainians have a lot of manpower at this moment. But this manpower also, we have to understand that they are less well trained. They only went through maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks of training after mobilization. So unless they are reserves, maybe they have previously served in the military before then. Maybe that helps a bit. But I disagree that the morale is high. You can't possibly have high morale when everything around you is exploding. That's how I think. Like, for example, the artillery is going to come tomorrow. Then the next news you receive is that the artillery was destroyed at one of the railway stations. How would that make you feel? It's not going to be that high morale when every single thing you do, you know, your reinforcement supposed to come, then got destroyed halfway through by airstrikes. Where else, if you look on the Russian side, nothing is happening behind the rear most of the time. There's not much sabotage. There is some sabotage within Russia, but it's not that much. It's the Ukrainians are not striking the rear, the supply lines of the Russians. So the Russian troops they don't even need to worry their back. They just move forward, they just fight. But the Ukrainians, they are having destructions everywhere, even all the way at the Polish border. Then your new troops, mobilized troops, training center can get destroyed. I don't think the morale is high. That's my opinion. But they do have the manpower.
Okay, so I have a question when, like for all of you, because it's already over 2 hours and 20 minutes, so I don't want to make this meeting so long. I want to close in advance. I will take maybe the last question if anybody want to do it, because I have someone that enter, like Eric. Eric, and thanks that you asked me in Instagram before. So I want to close with like an annunciation, because we are trying to organize like a geopolitical school here in Italy in October. So we will try to make a good program. I think that it's like the right moment to organize something that is very international about the geopolitical change of the world. My point of view, it's very different, but I will not talk about it today because it's not my point. The point of this meeting was to create as much as possible curiosity and different point of view about the situation that is affecting not only Ukraine but all over the world about the change of geopolitics. And the question that I wanted to do to all of you, because the point that I wanted to ask it's not militarily, but if you look at the balance of the trade commerce of Russia, in my point of view, it's very dangerous to, let's say, lose your 3 biggest friends in Europe, like in the commercial balance, like Italy, Germany, and France, and like try to make an alliance that is going east, let's say also to India and China, without any supply chain to give the same things that you are giving to us to east. If you look to the Russian infrastructure, we can talk still about SSSR infrastructure, except for some new changes like Nord Stream 1 and 2. It's still the pipes that you had 20 or 30 years ago. And there is only one pipe to China. There is not a big supply capacity to give the same. And also the prices of oil and gas and all this stuff that you are selling, like I'm talking about Russian Federation to China, it's very on sale if you compare to the European prices. So this is why, in my point of view, the question is how long can be this war, because by the economical capacity of Russian Federation, it's not about the military. When we are talking about the rubles, everybody that has a minimal capacity of, let's say, knowledge about economics knows that the ruble changes is fake and doped by the Russian central bank. It's not the real value. You cannot buy the foreign country, the foreign currency in Russia, maybe the last 2-3 days only online. So if you have a lot of requests and no sale, it's going up. So the problem is internal inflation. In Russia now it's reached about 20%. In Europe it's about 6-7. It's high, but in Russia it's 20. So it's very complicated. The question is, in your point of view, all of 3, and then I will take the last 1 or 2 questions. We will close. what could be like this war in the economical capacity of Russia. I'm not talking about Ukraine because it's supplied by the West, to continue this war in a long term, not in a short term. If we can say military summer with the war in Ukraine and defense politics Asia, I know that military summer can stay only few minutes, so I want to give him the stand, and then we will pass to the last question and we will close.
The question is if the thing that Poland and Ukraine announced is true. I'm talking about the same border. Let's take a look at the map one more time. Yes, we talked that yesterday there was a very interesting meeting in the Ukrainian parliament, and a lot of things were, a lot of talks were about this evening. I saw the Zelensky speech, and we saw the speech of Duda. And if it's true that the Poland and Ukraine are planning to create, and I repeat myself, they're planning to create, according to the talks, we can say, to create confederation or some kind of union between Poland and Ukraine, and also in the custom. That means that they will cut the Europe in two parts, from Baltic Sea till the Black Sea. And these two countries are able, under, of course, the US control, are able to control the traffic, gas traffic, oil traffic, cargo traffic, the railway traffic. They will be able to put the prices. So to tell the truth, it doesn't matter what Europeans think about this. It doesn't matter about the Russians. What do they think about this? How long can they can do this war? The thing is, what do these guys now decide, Poland and Ukraine? Even if they have power to control this territory from Baltic Sea till the Black Sea, I'm not sure that it's very good for anybody. So that's why the Russians, they will, of course, they will try to destroy this union, not to give this union to exist, because this is the existential question for the Russians and for the Europeans. This connection between Poland and Ukraine is the existential question for Europeans and the Russians. So I don't think that anybody wants this union in the middle of the Europe. Thank you.
Okay, so war in Ukraine, if you want to say something about.
Hold on. Okay, so you can hear me. Okay, if we go back to the question was, again, just to recap, is how long Russia can continue fighting, basically, right? Like
Let's not about the military.
Economy. Sorry, yeah, economy. So economy-wise, you can always go to subsistence level, right? And you can survive. And I'm sure that Russian population would be okay with that. So if you're talking about that, in terms of how economy affects ability to continue war in sort of military-wise, I think Russia has enough to basically have basic supply of shells, ammunition, weapons, like simple weapons, nothing complicated. Because, for example, I was talking about this Orlan 10 that is using cameras from I think Japan, Sony cameras and stuff. It's not like nothing really sophisticated, but simply Russia doesn't produce. Basically, the problem of Russia, it doesn't produce any value add products, and specifically anything that uses semiconductors. That's it. They don't have anything there, right? So that really cuts off. Like, you can use kind of like dumb artillery in this way, and that's what they've been using so far. Even the bombs, for the most part, are they unguided, right? So it's cheap, but they have a lot of resources. So basically, you can convert resources into these weapons and just basically hammer it away the way you want it. So that's what's going on. And in terms of going back to economy, the big question is actually really China, which is to what extent China is able to replace lost technology from the West. right? Our opinion, and this is opinion, that China will not be able to fully replace technology from the West, and specifically semiconductors, because that's a big deal, right? That's the whole fight. Well, not the whole fight, but the why Taiwan is so important, right? Why let's say US cares and the West cares is because it produces about 85% of all of semiconductors, all of the chips. So if Taiwan is out of action, we're going to be without basically computers, without any modern stuff in pretty short fashion, right? So that's why US is building right now semiconductor plants in the US where with the funding of US government, right? Because that's never happening in the US history, that the government funds, building specific, like a plant, any kind of like a sort of, how to say, basically there is not much direct involvement of US government in the US economy in general. And in this case, they basically partnering with Intel to do that, but still the funding is coming from the US government. And so, so what we're seeing, and because all of this, like Arlan 10, like most of this is based on semiconductors, and China will not be able to replace those. So eventually it will have extremely degenerative effect on the Russian economy. And specifically, like, for example, they right now very concerned where they're going to get servers for data centers, because they cannot get it. Right, and China will not be able to. Well, they can supply from their own inventory, but the worldwide inventory of that stuff is super low itself, right? So that's why the prices are very high for semiconductors in general. And then like internet dies, your economy goes to early 20th century, right? And then your ability to continue the war also goes very, very low. So that's a whole kind of interrelation between the economy, war, and the semiconductors and technology here. And hopefully, short enough answer. Hopefully, I answered the question. If there is more, then let me know if I need to clarify this whole thing more.
No, you answered perfectly, but it's for sure a very, very complicated issue about the main thing that I think that it's a miscalculation of all these words, that it could be not effective, like if the world was not so interconnected like it's now. Like you cannot make a local war that affect only that field. So we are looking what is happening about the interconnection, about the economies and the globalization. So this is why, but we will talk in October about this. So
right, but that's what I just want to interrupt you and apologize for that. But this is the global world, right? And if you cut in one place, it blows up in many other places. So for example, and I spoke about that in the videos, but it was a long time ago, that for example, there was 50% of the neon gas production is coming from Ukraine, and neon gas is essential. Is essential in production of the printed circuit boards, basically semiconductors. So if you have 50% lost, you cannot make the semiconductor. So basically, it's kind of like ingredient in making semiconductors, right? So now there's they're looking in Taiwan for replacement, whatever. But what I'm trying to say is this really can kind of blow up in very unexpected places, because most people don't know about all of this, like, that in Mariupol, actually, there was that production facility, right? Who knows, right? Like, nobody knows about that. And yeah, so just to add a little bit more color.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. I will give the word to Pasotti for an answer, and then we will close to Defense Politics Asia, and then we will close the session.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that the mood of the Russian people is close to his patriotic sentiment. Patriotic sentiment can resist to deep economic crisis, and this is the calculation of Mr. Putin. So I think that the economy in Russia will go very, very bad in the next months, And I fully agree that I think that there are no opportunities to try to find a substitution to the Western technology for the industrial production line in Russia. The main question on my point of view is when Russia will reach the culminating point. Culminating point is the point explained to us by von Clausewitz 2 centuries ago, and it is the point in which when you reach a point, the culminating point, you cannot achieve your strategic goals because you do not have enough resource to put on the field. This could be a different kind of resource, could be manpower, could be armaments, but also economic capacity to fulfill the needs of the first line of war. I am quite sure that the war will be still very long, thanks to the patriotic sentiment of Russia. They can accept the worst economic situation, taking in their hand the Russian flags. What will happen outside Russia is more complicated. I'm not worried about stagflation or inflation, because this phenomenon started well before the start of the war. And I think that our systematic agreement between different economic systems, we will have still an increase of cost about production in the next 2 years. I hope no more, but my opinion in the next year, also because we are going to reshoring a lot of production from some areas to more safe area. During this year, we learn an ancient truth about business. The problem is not your customer. The problem is the state of your customer. It's the country of your customer. And so we are going to change a lot in the international business relations. This will have a lot of strong consequences. We will have a slow increase of incomes, but I think that at the end of the history, some country will win and some country will lose. And I think that Western countries and some other big powers will be on the same side of history, and they will be the winner. I would like to close with, in my opinion, a very important thing for me. We are not against the Russian. I read some comments about my position or the position of other Italians. Really, we are not against Russia. We would like to buy gas from Russia, but they decided to sell us tanks, and it is not nice. So I am sure that it will take time, 2 years maybe, to obtain a different relations with Russia. But I have still a strong commitment in the force of a freedom, knowing that the freedom is not free. And I am sure that the freedom is the most revolutionary force inside the history of the world. And I'm sure that in the next years, this incredible force will arrive also in Russia. And we will be very happy of it. Thank you very much.
So, perfect. So the final intervention about this table to Defense Politics Asia, and then we will make the goodbyes and good night. For Defense Politics Asia, already good night, because I think it's 4 a.m. in Singapore. So
it's 5 a.m. It's morning.
Okay, fine. So good morning.
Yeah. Okay, so I actually don't know what's going to happen to Russia economically. It's not so clear how this will impact What I do know is that Russia will not run out of gas. The cars and the logistic supply chain will move because they produce fuel, they produce gas, they have coal, so they have no power issues. So they produce food, they won't have food issues. So in entire needs for survival, they are fine. They won't have food issue, no fuel issue, no power issue. What they will lose is luxury, comfort, and probably some kind of technology as well. If Google and Microsoft decided to sanction Russia, that's the end of Russia in terms of they'll go back 30 years. So not so economically, in terms of internal Russia, they definitely will not go hungry. Unlike the rest of the world, where this upcoming food crisis is going to hit very, very badly, it's not going to hit Russia that badly. So the inflation, while it might seem like there is a heavier inflation in Russia now, perhaps because I didn't check the numbers, I just hear from the previous speaker. But when the food crisis start to hit, when the fuel crisis start to get worse, then the inflation outside of Russia will get much, much worse. However, I do not agree that Russia will actually depend or tie so closely to China. China is a strategic rival to Russia. Russia is very worried or very wary of China. And in fact, to Russia, the biggest two rivals is actually China and USA. So it's not they will not just go all the way in and head dive into the arms of China, because people seem to forget there's still India. And India have not made a clear position about Russia up till now. India had very, very good relationship with Russia. And there is a chance that Russia may actually pivot further with India rather than China. But of course, they need the market. Like some of the previous speakers mentioned that Russia have lost a lot of the markets. So they will work with the Chinese. They want to export the goods to China. They want to get some of the luxury items that they lost from the West, from China. So I think limitedly speaking, it will kind of help Russia to maintain a little sense of civilization. But I do not know when the war will end. I do not know whether Russia's economy will collapse. It's likely to collapse if the sanctions is more complete, but at the moment it's not complete enough. And I think Europe cannot handle absolute sanction like what they did to North Korea. So otherwise, I think I have nothing much to add in terms of that.
So perfect. So thanks to everybody, to all the viewers. There was a lot of viewers also in Zoom, also in Facebook Live. I was surprised because we reached over a peak over 200 people, like 70 people here and more than 100 in Facebook Live. From tomorrow, I will prepare everything with subtitles. So I open 2-3 languages. So perfect. Thanks to military summer war in Ukraine, Defense Politics Asia. We will update you to any type of initiative that we are trying to organizing in October. For you to understand, the project is to recreate a geopolitical school that was made 10 years ago. So after 10 years, I think it's the right time to redo it for international students. That could be like international politics or also, let's say, amateur or whatever. And we will try to have war in Ukraine, military summary, and Defense Politics Asia on live, not in remote. And finally, I will take all the questions for the next room, if we will have it. And I thank you all, and good night to everybody, and good morning to Defense Politics Asia and to all the other, let's say, viewers from outside Europe. So also bye. Good night. Ciao ciao.
Ragazzi. Io vado su cotto, ma cotto forte.